"You're fired." 2 words I never expected to hear from my own father. Yet there he sat behind his mahogany desk, his steel-gray eyes fixed on me with a coldness I'd never seen before. The office felt suffocating, despite the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "Dad, if you just listen about the Henderson account." He held up his hand, silencing me. "It's Mr. Matthews in this office, Alexandra. And the Henderson account was the final straw. Your innovative approach cost us a $12 million contract." I gripped the arms of my chair, forcing myself to stay calm. The traditional approach wasn't working. If we just tried my strategy for 1 more month. Enough. He slammed his hand on the desk, making his Best CEO award rattle. "This isn't some startup playground where you can experiment with wild ideas. This is Matthews and Sons, a company that's been built on tradition and proven methods for 40 years. I could back a laugh at the irony of Matthews and Sons, considering I, his only daughter, had worked here since I was 16, starting in the mailroom and working my way up through every department. Meanwhile, my younger brother David had waltzed in straight from business school into a vice president position. "The board agrees with me," he continued, shuffling some papers on his desk. "You're not cut out for business, Alexandra. Not at this level. Maybe something smaller would suit you better. A boutique shop perhaps, or a small local consulting firm." The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my charcoal gray suit, the same one I'd worn to countless meetings where I'd brought in millions in new business. Business that apparently didn't matter now. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He didn't even look up. "Your severance package will be handled by HR. Please clear out your office by the end of the day." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Dad?" He glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. Remember this moment. The walk to my office felt like a funeral march. Employees quickly looked away as I passed, news of my firing already spreading through the corporate grapevine. Only Janet, my assistant for the past 5 years, met my eyes. "I heard," she said, following me into my office. "It's not right, Alex. Everyone knows the Henderson account was lost because David promised them impossible delivery dates." I started packing my belongings into a cardboard box. "Doesn't matter now. David's a Matthews son, and I'm just the daughter who doesn't understand traditional business." Janet watched me take down my framed Harvard MBA and various awards. "What will you do?" I carefully wrapped the photo of my mother. She passed away when I was 12, but I still remembered her last words to me. "Don't let them dim your light, sweetheart. Shine anyway." "I'm going to build something," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "Something bigger than Matthews and Sons could ever be." Janet's eyes lit up. "Need an executive assistant?" I smiled, really looked at her for the first time that day. Janet wasn't just an assistant. She was a brilliant operations manager trapped in an administrative role because of the old boys club mentality at Matthews and Sons. "How about chief operations officer instead?" Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." I handed her my personal card, the one without the Matthews and Sons logo. "Call me tomorrow if you're interested. And Janet, don't tell anyone about this conversation." The elevator ride down to the lobby was surreal. 15 years of my life, reduced to one cardboard box. I'd given everything to this company, sacrificed relationships, worked weekends and holidays, brought in major accounts that had doubled our revenue. And none of it mattered because I wasn't a son. As I pushed through the revolving doors onto 5th Avenue, my phone buzzed. A text from David. Tough break, sis. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients. Maybe retail is more your speed. I didn't respond. Instead, I hailed a cab and gave the driver an address in Brooklyn. Time to visit the one person who had always believed in me. 20 minutes later, I climbed the stairs to a modest brownstone and knocked on the familiar red door. It opened to reveal an elegant woman in her 70s, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the late hour. Alexandra? My grandmother's eyes narrowed as she took in my appearance and the box in my arms. He didn't. He did. She ushered me inside, straight through to her cozy kitchen where a pot of tea was already brewing. Some things never changed. Grandma Rose always seemed to know when she was needed. Tell me everything, she said, setting out her best china teacups. So I did. I told her about the Henderson account, about David's impossible promises, about Dad's coldness, and the board's decision. She listened without interrupting, her bright blue eyes, so different from my father's gray ones, taking in every detail. When I finished, she got up and walked to her study. I heard her opening drawers, shuffling papers. She returned with a thick manila envelope. I've been waiting for this day, she said, sliding the envelope across the table. Your mother knew it would come too. She made me promise to give you this when it did. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was another envelope, sealed with wax, and a folder filled with documents. My eyes widened as I read through them. Grandma, this is your mother's inheritance, she finished. The one your father knows nothing about. Her family's shipping company holdings, real estate investments, everything she built before she married him. All in a trust, waiting for you. I stared at the numbers. Millions. Not as much as Matthews and Sons was worth, but more than enough to start something new. Why didn't you tell me before? Grandma Rose took a sip of her tea. Because your mother knew you needed to try it his way first, to give him a chance to see your worth. She set down her cup with a decisive clink. He failed that test rather spectacularly, wouldn't you say? I looked at the documents again, plans already forming in my mind. The Henderson account. They were looking for exactly what I proposed. Innovation, modernization, a fresh approach. Then perhaps, Grandma Rose smiled, it's time to show them what Alexandra Matthews can really do. I stayed at my grandmother's house late into the night planning. By the time I left, I had the beginnings of a strategy that would change everything. Dad thought I wasn't cut out for business. Fine. I'd show him exactly what kind of business I was cut out for. The game was about to change, and Matthews and Sons wouldn't know what hit them until it was too late. 1 year later, the Henderson Group's downtown headquarters buzzed with anticipation. In the main conference room, Janet, now my COO, was setting up for our presentation. Through the glass walls, I could see Thomas Henderson himself pacing, checking his watch every few minutes. They're here, Janet whispered, glancing at her tablet. Matthews and Sons representatives just arrived in the lobby. I smoothed down my tailored Armani suit, crimson red, a far cry from the conservative grays and blacks my father preferred. Right on time to watch their biggest account slip away. Alex. Janet's eyes sparkled with mischief. Did you plan this? The presentation time? Pure coincidence. I smiled. The fact that my father and brother are desperate to keep Henderson's business while I'm here to take it. Now that's just good strategy. The last year had been a whirlwind. Using my mother's inheritance and Grandma Rose's connections, I'd built Nova Enterprises from the ground up. We specialized in exactly what Matthews and Sons feared most: innovative business solutions for the digital age. Janet had been instrumental, bringing over key talent who'd been overlooked at Matthews and Sons. Turns out, I wasn't the only one tired of traditional methods. The conference room door opened. Thomas Henderson entered, followed by his board members. And behind them, looking significantly more worn than the last time I'd seen them, came my father and brother. Dad stopped short when he saw me, his face draining of color. David actually took a step backward, nearly colliding with a board member. "Alexandra?" My father's voice cracked slightly. "Mr. Matthews?" I replied coolly, extending my hand. What a surprise. I wasn't aware Matthews and Sons would be joining us today. Thomas Henderson looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "You know each other?" "Ms. Matthews used to work for us," my father said stiffly, ignoring my outstretched hand. "Matthews?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Any relation?" "Just a former employee," Dad cut in quickly. "Actually," I smiled, "I'm his daughter, but that's ancient history. Shall we begin the presentation?" The next hour was a masterclass in everything my father had dismissed as wild ideas. I showed them Nova's digital transformation strategy, our AI-driven analytics, our cloud-based solutions, everything the Henderson Group had wanted a year ago when Matthews and Sons had insisted on sticking to outdated methods. David's face grew increasingly red as board members nodded appreciatively. My father sat stone-faced, but I could see his hands clenching under the table. "Very impressive, Ms. Matthews," Thomas said when I finished. "This is exactly what we've been looking for. But I have to ask, why didn't you propose these solutions when you were with Matthews and Sons?" The room went silent. All eyes turned to my father. "Oh, what I did," I replied softly. "In fact, it was my last presentation before leaving the company. Wasn't it, Mr. Matthews?" Dad's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, Thomas Henderson stood up. "Well, I think we've seen everything we need. Ms. Matthews, your proposal is exactly what the Henderson Group needs to move forward. I believe our legal team already has the contracts drawn up." "What?" David spluttered. "You can't be serious. We've handled your business for 20 years. And in those 20 years, you've fallen behind every technological advancement in the industry," Thomas replied firmly. "It's time for a change." As the contracts were being signed, I caught my father's eye. He looked older somehow, defeated. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but then I remembered that day in his office, his cold dismissal of everything I tried to build. The Henderson account was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Nova Enterprises systematically targeted Matthews and Sons' biggest clients. We didn't poach them. We simply offered them what they'd been begging for: innovation, efficiency, results. One by one, they jumped ship. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. Janet burst into my office, her face flushed with excitement. "Alex, you need to see this." She handed me her tablet. On the screen was a financial news article: "Matthews and Sons stock plummets amid client exodus. Bankruptcy fears loom." Below was a photo of my father leaving his office, looking haggard. The caption read, "CEO Robert Matthews declines to comment on company's future." My phone rang. Grandma Rose's number. "I just saw the news," she said when I answered. "How are you feeling?" I looked out my office window at the Manhattan skyline. From here, I could see the Matthews and Sons building, no longer the towering symbol of success it once was. I didn't do this for revenge. I said quietly. I know, darling. You did it because it needed to be done. Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to build something better. They're going to lose everything, aren't they? Unless someone steps in to save them. There was a knowing tone in her voice. Someone who understands both innovation and tradition. Before I could respond, Janet appeared in my doorway again, her face serious. Alex, your father is here. He's asking to see you. I took a deep breath. Send him in. Alexandra. Grandma Rose said quickly, remember what your mother always said. Don't let them dim your light. I finished. I remember. No, dear. The other thing, she said. Sometimes the strongest bridges are built over the deepest divides. I hung up and straightened my shoulders as Janet showed my father in. He looked nothing like the imposing figure who'd fired me a year ago. His suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. Alexandra, he said softly, we need to talk. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same position I'd been in that day in his office. How the tables had turned. Yes, I replied, I believe we do. My father sat across from me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The mighty Robert Matthews, reduced to asking his incompetent daughter for help. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The board is meeting tomorrow, he began, his voice rough. They're voting on whether to file for bankruptcy or seek immediate merger. He paused, swallowing hard. David's already resigned. Took a position with Goldman Sachs this morning. Of course he had. David had always been good at abandoning ship when things got tough. And you're here because... I kept my voice neutral, professional. Because you won. He looked up, meeting my eyes. You did exactly what I said you couldn't do. Built something remarkable. Modern. Successful. His hands trembled slightly. While I watched 40 years of work crumble because I was too proud, too stubborn to change. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Did you ever wonder why I stayed at Matthews & Sons for 15 years? Working my way up from the mailroom when you could have given me a top position like you did David. He shook his head. Because I loved that company. Not for its name, not for its prestige, but for what it could be. Every innovation I suggested, every change I tried to implement, it wasn't to destroy tradition. It was to help Matthews & Sons evolve. And I shut you down at every turn, he admitted quietly. Yes, you did. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Do you know what really hurt, Dad? Not the firing. Not even choosing David over me. It was that you never once asked why I thought we needed to change. Tell me now. I turned back to face him. Because business isn't about maintaining what worked yesterday. It's about building what will work tomorrow. Mom understood that. It's why her family's shipping company survived when all their competitors went under. His head snapped up. Your mother's company. But that was sold after she died. No, Dad, it wasn't. I pulled out the documents Grandma Rose had given me that night, sliding them across the desk. Mom left it in trust for me. She knew someday I'd need it, either to save Matthews & Sons or to build something new. He stared at the papers, realization dawning on his face. All this time, she knew. She saw in you what I couldn't. What you wouldn't, I corrected gently. He nodded, accepting the truth of it. So this is it then. You'll watch Matthews & Sons dissolve, knowing you were right all along. I pressed the intercom. Janet, bring in the proposal, please. Janet entered with a thick folder, placing it on my desk with a knowing smile before leaving us alone again. What's this? my father asked. A merger proposal. Nova Enterprises wants to acquire Matthews and Sons. His eyes widened. You'd buy us out? No. I sat down again, opening the folder. I'm proposing a true merger. Nova's innovation and digital expertise combined with Matthews and Sons' 40 years of industry relationships and experience. Not destroying tradition, but evolving it. You'd save the company? After everything? You once told me I wasn't cut out for business, I said, pushing the proposal toward him. But what you never understood is that real business isn't about crushing competitors or maintaining power. It's about building something lasting, something meaningful. He picked up the proposal with shaking hands. And the name. Matthews Nova, I replied, honoring the past while embracing the future. And my role? You'd stay on as Chairman Emeritus, focusing on client relationships, what you've always done best. I'd be CEO, leading the company's strategic direction. I paused. As equals this time, father and daughter, finally working together instead of against each other. He was quiet for a long moment, reading through the proposal. Finally, he looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Respect. Your mother would be so proud of you, he said softly. She'd be proud of us both, if we can make this work. He stood up, straightening his tie, a glimpse of the Robert Matthews of old. The board meets at 9 tomorrow morning. Join me. I'll be there. After he left, I called Grandma Rose. Well, she asked, how did it go? We're merging the companies. Matthews Nova, bringing the best of both worlds together. She chuckled. Your mother always said the strongest bridges are built over the deepest divides. You've built quite a bridge, Alexandra. The next morning, I stood beside my father in the Matthews and Sons boardroom, the same room where I'd presented countless proposals that had been rejected. The board members watched in stunned silence as we presented the merger plan together. The vote was unanimous. Later that afternoon, I sat in what had once been my father's office, now mine. The Best CEO award still stood on the shelf, but beside it now sat a framed photo of my mother. Janet knocked and entered. The press release is ready. Want to take a look? I smiled, thinking of how far we'd both come. In a minute. First, call the Henderson Group. I want to personally tell them about the merger. Already done, she grinned. Thomas Henderson said, and I quote, it's about time those Matthews women took charge. I laughed, then turned to look out at the city. Somewhere out there, in an office much like this one, my father was probably doing the same thing, seeing New York not as it was, but as it could be. A year ago, he'd fired me for not understanding business. Now together, we were building something neither of us could have created alone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's showing them a better way forward. And sometimes, just sometimes, the black sheep of the family becomes its greatest legacy. That evening, I visited my mother's grave, placing a single white rose beside her headstone. The merger announcement was already making headlines. Matthews Nova, a new era in business. You were right, Mom, I whispered. About everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Dinner tomorrow? I'd love to hear more of your ideas about the digital transformation project. I smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. The sun was setting over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the cemetery. But I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow anymore. I was casting my own light, bright enough for us all to see by. And that, perhaps, was the greatest success of all. My mother's annual Christmas dinner had always been more of a performance than a family gathering. The crystal chandelier casting its golden glow over the mahogany dining table, the fine china plates perfectly arranged, the expensive wine poured into delicate glasses. It was all part of her carefully orchestrated show of family perfection. But this year was different. The usual tension that simmered beneath our polite smiles had turned into something heavier, darker. Grandma Rose's empty chair at the head of the table seemed to mock our pretense of normalcy. "Sarah, darling, how's the hospital?" My mother's voice carried that familiar note of pride as she addressed my older sister. "I heard you're being considered for chief of surgery." I took a slow sip of water, already knowing what would come next. Sarah's achievements had always been the centerpiece of these family dinners, each accomplishment displayed like another jewel in my mother's crown. "Actually, Mom," Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her wine glass, her engagement ring catching the light, "I got the position last week. Youngest chief of surgery in the hospital's history." The table erupted in congratulations. My father beamed, my mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered napkin, and my younger brother Michael, the successful corporate lawyer, raised his glass in a toast. "To Sarah," he announced, continuing the Bennett family legacy of excellence. I stared down at my untouched dinner, fighting the urge to point out that saving their struggling investment firm last year through my anonymous consulting work was also quite an achievement. But they didn't know about that, just like they didn't know about my thriving international business consultancy or the fact that I'd helped 3 Fortune 500 companies avoid bankruptcy in the past year. No, to them, I was still just Olivia, the disappointment, the black sheep who'd refused to follow the prescribed path of medicine or law, the daughter who'd walked away from a promising position at their investment firm to start her own business. "And what about you, Olivia?" My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. "Still doing that. What do you call it? Freelance work?" The way she said freelance made it sound like I was selling handmade crafts at local fairs, rather than running a multi-million-dollar consultancy. "I'm doing fine, Mother." I kept my voice neutral, years of practice helping me maintain my composure. "Fine." Sarah's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "At your age, you should be more than just fine. Remember when you left the firm? Dad gave you such a wonderful opportunity, and you just threw it away." I remembered that day clearly. I discovered serious discrepancies in the firm's accounting, tried to warn my father, but he dismissed my concerns. 2 years later, those same issues nearly bankrupted them. I'd stepped in anonymously through my consultancy to save them, but they never knew. "Sarah's right," my mother sighed dramatically. "If only you'd listened to us, you could have had a real career by now. Instead," she gestured vaguely at me, as if my entire existence was somehow lacking. "Speaking of real careers," Michael chimed in, straightening his designer tie, "my firm just landed the Maxwell account. $3 billion in assets." He smirked in my direction. "But I suppose that's a bit beyond your scope, sis. How's your little consulting thing going?" I thought about the confidential documents sitting in my home office, papers showing that the Maxwell account was actually being managed by my company, with Michael's firm handling only the basic legal work. But again, they didn't know that. "It's going well enough," I replied softly, cutting into my salmon with deliberate precision. "Well enough to afford that dress." Sarah's eyes flicked over my simple black sheath dress. "I could take you shopping sometime. I know some lovely consignment shops." My dress was actually a hand-tailored piece from a small Parisian atelier, costing more than Sarah's monthly salary. But they didn't need to know that either. "That's so thoughtful of you, Sarah," I murmured, fighting back a smile as I thought of the Channel bags gathering dust in my closet. The conversation drifted back to Sarah's accomplishments, Michael's cases, and my mother's social circle. I sat quietly, letting their words wash over me like background noise. My thoughts kept drifting to Grandma Rose, the only person in this family who'd ever really seen me. She passed away 3 months ago, but her last words to me still echoed in my mind. "Patience, my dear. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them underestimate you until the perfect moment." The perfect moment was coming sooner than they knew. Tomorrow morning, the family would gather at Mr. Harrison's office for the reading of Grandma's will. They were all so certain about what would happen. The family estate split between Sarah and Michael, the vacation homes, the investment portfolios, all divided between the successful siblings. But Grandma Rose had always been cleverer than anyone gave her credit for. She'd seen through the family's pretense, recognized their hollow achievements for what they were. Most importantly, she'd known exactly what I'd built, while they were all too busy looking down their noses at me. "I heard from Mr. Harrison today," my mother announced, pulling me from my thoughts. "The will reading is at 10 tomorrow. I assume you'll be there, Olivia. Though really, it's more a formality for you." "Of course, Mother." I dabbed my lips with my napkin, hiding my smile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Just try not to be disappointed," Sarah added with false sympathy. "We all know Grandma Rose understood the importance of keeping the family legacy in capable hands. If only they knew that Grandma Rose had been my first investor, that she'd helped me establish my company, while they were all dismissing my dreams as foolish fantasies. If only they knew that their precious family legacy was already in my hands. But they would find out soon enough. Tomorrow, their carefully constructed world of superiority would come crashing down. Tomorrow, they would learn that the black sheep they dismissed for so long was actually the wolf they should have feared. I raised my water glass, offering them a smile that none of them could quite read. "To family," I said quietly. They all echoed the toast, their glasses clinking with expensive certainty. None of them noticed the glint in my eye, the slight curve of my lips that wasn't quite a smile. None of them had any idea what was coming. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Harrison. "Everything is prepared for tomorrow, Ms. Bennett, just as your grandmother arranged." I didn't reply. Instead, I parked my car in the private garage of my penthouse apartment, the one my family thought was a modest rental in a developing neighborhood, and made my way to my home office. The wall of windows offered a spectacular view of the city skyline, lights twinkling like stars against the dark sky. Opening my safe, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside was Grandma Rose's letter to me, written 6 months before her death. I'd read it so many times I knew the words by heart, but tonight I needed to see them again. "My dearest Olivia, they never saw you clearly, did they? Too busy preening in their own reflections to notice the quiet strength you were building. But I saw you. I saw how you turned their dismissal into determination, their doubt into drive. Tomorrow, they'll finally see what I've seen all along. The black sheep of the family isn't lost. She's been leading the flock all along. All my love, Grandma Rose." I placed the letter back in the safe, next to the documents that would change everything tomorrow. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, a rare vintage that cost more than Michael's monthly mortgage payment, and settled into my favorite armchair. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Mr. Harrison's law office occupied the entire top floor of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. As I stepped out of the elevator at precisely 9:45 a.m. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. I actually owned this building through one of my shell corporations, not that my family knew that. The reception area was already full. Sarah sat perched on an expensive leather chair, her surgeon's hands fidgeting with her pearl necklace. Michael paced by the window, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. My parents sat together, my mother's face carefully composed, though her fingers drummed restlessly against her designer handbag. "Cutting it rather close, aren't you?" Sarah's voice dripped with disapproval as I walked in. I checked my watch, still 15 minutes early, but didn't bother responding. Instead, I took a seat near the window, smoothing down my simple black dress. The same one they'd mockingly suggested came from a consignment shop. Now, my mother interjected with forced cheerfulness. "Let's all try to remember what Grandma Rose would want. Family harmony." Michael snorted. "Family harmony? Please, Mother. We all know why we're here. The family estate needs proper management, and some of us," his eyes flickered meaningfully toward me, "clearly aren't equipped for that responsibility." Before I could respond, Mr. Harrison's assistant opened the conference room doors. "The family may enter now." We filed in like actors taking our places on stage. The conference room was impressive, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. At the head of the long table sat Mr. Harrison, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him an appropriately grave appearance. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of legal practice. "We're here today for the reading of Rose Eleanor Bennett's last will and testament." I watched my family settle into their seats, all of them wearing nearly identical expressions of barely concealed anticipation. They'd spent the last 3 months since Grandma's death carefully planning how they'd divide her considerable estate. "Before we begin," Mr. Harrison continued, "I must stress that what I'm about to read reflects your grandmother's explicit wishes. She was—" He paused, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment, "very specific about certain conditions." "Conditions?" My father frowned. "What conditions?" "The estate should simply be divided between the children, as is traditional in our family." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Perhaps it's best if I simply read the will." He opened a thick leather portfolio and began. "I, Rose Eleanor Bennett, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." The initial paragraphs were standard legal language. I watched my siblings grow increasingly impatient, Michael checking his watch, Sarah tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the table. Then came the part they'd been waiting for. "Regarding the distribution of my estate, valued at approximately $48 million. Sarah sat up straighter. Michael stopped checking his phone. "I hereby declare that the entire estate, including all properties, investments, and assets, shall be placed under the sole control of my granddaughter, Olivia Bennett." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. "What?" Sarah's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Mr. Harrison continued reading, his voice steady. "However, Olivia will have the authority to distribute portions of the estate to other family members, if and only if she deems them worthy. Her decisions in this matter shall be final and binding." "This is ridiculous," Michael exploded, jumping to his feet. "She can't do this." "I assure you, she can and did," Mr. Harrison replied calmly. "Furthermore, there's more." My mother had gone pale. "More?" "Yes," the will continues. "To ensure my wishes are carried out, I have arranged for all family trust funds, including those previously established for Sarah and Michael Bennett, to be transferred under Olivia's control, effective immediately. The chaos that erupted was exactly what I'd expected. Sarah burst into tears, her perfect makeup beginning to run. Michael started shouting about contesting the will. My mother looked like she might faint. My father stood up, his face red with anger. This is preposterous. Olivia doesn't know the first thing about managing this kind of wealth. She runs a small consulting business, for God's sake. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but clear. Actually, Father, there's something you should know about that small consulting business. Mr. Harrison handed me a folder. I opened it, laying out several documents on the table. Phoenix Global Consulting Group, I began, watching their faces. Ever heard of it? Michael scoffed. Of course. They're one of the largest financial consulting firms in the world. They're the ones who saved Dad's company last year when... His voice trailed off as realization began to dawn. When it was about to go bankrupt, I finished for him. Yes, I know. I'm the one who arranged that bailout. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. I'm the founder and CEO of Phoenix Global, I said simply. Have been for the past 8 years. Grandma Rose was my first investor. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls. My father had gone from red to white, all the blood draining from his face. That's impossible, Michael stammered. Phoenix Global is worth just over $3 billion. I finished for him. Which makes Grandma's $48 million estate seem rather modest in comparison, doesn't it? Sarah's tears had stopped abruptly. But you live in that small apartment. You wear these simple clothes. I couldn't help but smile. That small apartment is a penthouse that costs more than your house, Sarah. And this simple dress? It's custom made by the same designer who refuses to sell to you because you were rude to his staff last year. Why? My mother whispered. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You were all so convinced I was a failure, so certain I couldn't succeed without following your prescribed path. It was easier to let you think what you wanted. And Grandma knew. My father's voice was barely audible. She knew everything. I confirmed. She watched all of you dismiss me, underestimate me, mock my choices, and she watched me build something far beyond what any of you have achieved. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. There's one final part of the will I need to read. Everyone turned back to him, still shell-shocked. To my family, he read, I leave you with this lesson. True success isn't measured by titles or appearances, but by character and determination. I've watched you all pride yourselves on your achievements, while belittling the quiet ambition of my beloved Olivia. Today, you learn how wrong you've been. The black sheep of your family has become the shepherd of your flock. I stood up, gathering my papers. Mr. Harrison will provide you all with documents detailing the new financial arrangements. I suggest you review them carefully. Your trust funds will remain intact, but there will be conditions. Conditions? Michael's voice cracked. What conditions? I paused at the door, turning back to face my family. These people who had dismissed me for so long, who were now staring at me like they'd never seen me before. That's for me to decide, I said quietly. After all, I'm no longer the black sheep you can ignore. I'm the one holding the purse strings now. As I walked out of the conference room, I heard Sarah burst into fresh tears, Michael start swearing, and my mother call my name. But I didn't look back. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. A new notification popped up. Trust fund transfers complete. Everything had changed. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about finally being seen for who I really was. Grandma Rose would have been proud. The next few weeks were exactly what I'd expected. A storm of desperate attempts to regain control. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, each one more manipulative than the last. From Sarah, "Olivia, we need to talk. I know we've had our differences, but we're still sisters. You can't just cut us off like this." From Michael, "This is completely unfair. I have commitments, investments. I need access to my trust fund." From Mother, "Darling, please. What will people say? The country club is already buzzing with rumors. We need to present a united front." I read each message but didn't respond. Instead, I focused on my work, steering Phoenix Global through a major merger while simultaneously restructuring my family's finances. It was during one of these late nights at the office that my assistant, Lisa, interrupted me. "Miss Bennett, your sister is here." I looked up from my computer screen. Through the glass walls of my corner office, I could see Sarah standing in the reception area. Gone was her usual air of superiority. She looked smaller somehow, uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. "Send her in." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in my office. The spectacular city view, the elegant furnishings, the clear symbols of power and success she'd never imagined I possessed. "This is quite something," she managed, sinking into one of the leather chairs across from my desk. "What do you want, Sarah?" She flinched at my directness. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the will reading, about how we treated you, about all the things we never knew." "You mean all the things you never bothered to ask about," I corrected quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "That too." She took a deep breath. "The hospital board is reviewing my position as chief of surgery. Apparently, some questions have been raised about certain decisions I made." I nodded. I knew all about those decisions, the corners she'd cut, the favors she'd called in, the qualified candidates she'd pushed aside to secure her position. "And you're here because?" "Because I need your help," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Not just with money, but with everything. I've built my whole life on appearances, on what Mother and Father expected. I don't know who I am without that." I studied my sister's face, seeing for the first time the cracks in her perfect facade. "Do you know why Grandma Rose invested in my company?" Sarah shook her head. "Because I showed her a real business plan. Not a name or a title or a designer outfit. Actual substance. She taught me that true success isn't about impressing others. It's about building something meaningful." Tears started rolling down Sarah's cheeks, smearing her expensive mascara. "I never knew her like you did I? I was too busy trying to be perfect." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." I opened my drawer and pulled out a folder. "This contains two things. First, a complete audit of your decisions at the hospital. Second, a plan to correct those mistakes, ethically and legally." Her hands trembled as she took the folder. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Because Grandma Rose didn't make me the executor of her will for revenge. She did it to teach this family a lesson about value. Real value." The next visitor came 3 days later. Michael stormed into my office unannounced, his face red with anger. "You've frozen all my accounts," he shouted. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to my reputation?" I calmly looked up from my computer. "Sit down, Michael." I will not. Sit down. Something in my voice made him comply. I pulled up a document on my screen and turned the monitor toward him. Do you recognize this? His face went pale. It was a detailed report of every client he'd overcharged, every corner he'd cut, every ethical line he'd crossed in his pursuit of success. How did you? I know everything, Michael. Every shortcut, every lie, every client you've cheated. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate before taking control of the family's finances? He slumped in his chair. What are you going to do? That depends on you. I have a proposal, one that involves you actually earning your success for a change. The hardest conversation came last. My parents requested a meeting at their house, the home I'd grown up in, where I'd spent so many years feeling invisible. They were waiting in the living room, looking oddly diminished. The usual trappings of wealth surrounded them, but somehow they no longer seemed to fit. Olivia, my mother began, we've been talking about everything, about how we treated you. My father cleared his throat. When I nearly lost the company last year, it was you who saved it, wasn't it? Through Phoenix Global? I nodded. Why? He asked. Why help us after how we treated you? Because that's what families should do, I replied. Support each other, not tear each other down to feel superior. My mother started crying softly. We were so wrong about you, so terribly wrong. Yes, I agreed, you were, but that's not why I'm here. I opened my briefcase and took out several documents. These are the new terms for the family trust. There will be changes. They listened in silence as I outlined my conditions. No more trust fund payments without proof of actual work or contribution. No more blank checks for maintaining appearances. Resources would be allocated based on merit, not status. But what will people think? My mother whispered. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here, I pointed out. It's time for this family to develop some substance behind the style. 1 month later, I stood in my office, looking out over the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She was starting over at a smaller hospital, working her way up properly this time. Michael had accepted a junior position at a respected law firm, learning to do things the right way. My parents were adjusting to their new reality, slowly learning to value achievement over appearance. On my desk sat a framed photo of Grandma Rose, her eyes twinkling with that knowing look she always had. Next to it lay her final letter to me, the one I'd only opened after the will reading. My dearest Olivia, by now they know, not just about your success, but about the strength they never saw. Use this power wisely, not for revenge, but for redemption. Sometimes the black sheep becomes the shepherd not to punish the flock, but to guide them to better pastures. You've built something remarkable, my dear. Now help them build something real of their own. All my love, Grandma Rose. I smiled, touching the letter gently. She had known exactly what she was doing, setting up this elaborate lesson. It was never about the money. It was about forcing my family to finally see the truth about success, value, and what really matters. My phone buzzed again. A message from Sarah. Meeting for coffee tomorrow? I could use some advice about this new position. I texted back, yes. And Sarah? Wear whatever you want. No designer labels required. Looking out at the city lights, I felt at peace. The black sheep had indeed become the shepherd, but not to lord over the flock, to lead them toward something better, something real. Grandma Rose would have liked that.